give people a bit of a chance to start tuning in. We're pressing record, and we'll just see how we go as people slowly start to join the call. Hello, Jody. How you doing? We're just doing a little bit of the preemptive stuff. We'll get started in a second or so, or in a minute or so. Jody, Bryony, how you doing, Bryony? You're good. You can please drop a little hello in the question box, chat box rather. The lovely Megan. Oh my God, everyone's here. Hi, Cassandra. Thanks, Jody. Yeah, I'm still a bit crook, to be honest. It's been a hard week of not coronavirus, thank goodness, but yeah, a nasty bug. So, but anyway, I'm getting there. Hope everyone else is feeling well. Now, we are broadcasting this live on Facebook Live as well, theoretically. So with a bit of luck, that's all kind of working away. All right. I think we get this rock show on the road. First of all, we're here. Let's get ourselves back together. We're at there's never been a better time to write your book webinar. And it certainly has, it certainly is the case, I think, on that side of things. Thanks so much for tuning into today's webinar. I want to do a big welcome to Mr. Michael Hanrahan. Hello, Michael. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on the call. And just your volume just was a little bit quiet there again, Michael. I'm not sure if we've got some funny little techo thing going on there. But Michael, obviously you and I talk about books left, right and centre. We talk about books until the cows come home. We talk about writing books, publishing books. It's nice to see people saying, well, okay, the coronavirus is here. Maybe I'll use this time to be a little bit more productive and write my book. And I know that that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we dive into that, do you want to just let everyone who's on the call and those who are listening to this as a recording, perhaps know a little bit more about your background in publishing and kind of things you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. So my father was a writer, so I've actually been around this stuff my whole life. I've been going to book launches since I was probably about 5 years old. So this is what it's kind of my world and has been for pretty much my whole life. So I did a writing and editing degree at university. Went on to get a job at a small publishing company, which then got taken over by a large publishing company. So I went from there being from editor to managing editor and production coordinator. So that's the person who manages the printing and all that side of things. Then I left. I actually went for a job at Penguin, got offered the job, decided I'd rather go freelance. So I worked freelance for about 15 years. And about the last 4 or 5 years, we've specialized in what we call self-publishing for small business. So we now run a website called Publish Central, and we offer author training services. So we've got a course and there's all sorts of free resources. We offer publishing coaching, and we also provide the publishing services for authors who are interested.
Beautiful. Okay. And so I've been working with Michael now, I guess, for maybe last 6 years, 7 years, something like that, Michael, in terms of publishing. Michael comes to my retreats most of the time, my author retreats as well, and shares his expertise on all things to do with publishing in reality. The other side of it, sorry, I'm just kind of juggling a few little things here, folks. I'm not, the R-ing is that me looking at other things, trying to balance it all out. Anyway, those of you who perhaps are on the call who don't necessarily know who I am, obviously, I guess I'm an author is predominantly what I'm known for. I've got 13 books, soon to be 14 books that I've written over the last 20 years. Some published with publishing companies like Allen & Unwin and Simon & Schuster, others self-published. And I've been very fortunate, had those books sold in 65 countries around the world and translated into a dozen different languages, predominantly on business, personal development kind of areas. In the last 6-7 years, though, I've also done a lot of book author coaching and helped almost 700 people now to write their first book. And I've got to say, it's something that I absolutely love and adore doing. And I have a couple of bookshelves in my living room here that you can't quite see that are filled with all of my authors' books. And it's my little happy place to just go and look at all those books, pull them out, because I know the story behind them all, and I know the authors, and I know what's gone into writing each of those books as well. And I also run author retreats author training retreats and do a lot of, one-on-one coaching on that side of things as well. So that's how we fit together. Pretty much I help people to write the books, then Michael helps them to publish the books. And because we have such a great overlap, it just makes sense for us to do things like what we're doing now, this webinar or the retreats or really anything around this particular space. Now, during the webinar, if you want to ask questions, please drop them in the chat box. You're more than welcome. Just to let you know a little bit about how it's also going to work, we've got a few kind of key topics that we want to talk through today. And then we're going to have a Q&A as well at the end, which, again, you can ask really pretty much anything you like that's going to help you to get started or to get your writing journey progressed, Megan. I'm looking at you when I say that, Megan, I might add as well. So there's nowhere to hide really here, is there? So just use the chat box and that's going to help everyone out. So if I'm kind of looking around furiously, that's what I'm actually doing. All right, Michael, we good to go?
Absolutely.
Righto. So, mate, in your opinion, apart from the obvious fact that we're housebound and we probably have a bit more time on our hands because we can't go out and do as much, what do you honestly think that this is a good time to write your book? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I've actually, as I'm sure you have, had this conversation numerous times.
I have.
Yeah, this has obviously hit everybody out of nowhere. So the reason it's such a good time, like you say, apart from the obvious fact that we all have a bit more time on our hands now, as some of us do. What we need to be doing right now is the advantages that publishing a book gives you during the good times. You need those even more right now. So a book gives you, builds your profile, builds your credibility, all that kind of thing. We all know that when business is good, that's, everybody loves to get those advantages. Those advantages are even more important now. We are going to come out of this at some point. So whether obviously it's the big question right now, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is, we are going to come out of this. Some businesses are going to be left standing, some aren't. So what you want to do is make sure that you're one of those businesses that is still standing, and a book can certainly help you do that.
Yep, great. And I guess how specifically?
So, the usual things we talk about are obviously, building your profile. So writing a book builds you up as an authority in your field. Building your sort of marketing tool for your business. So just getting out and about with your book. You were talking last night on the session, Andrew, about building your brand at the moment. So it's all that. You can connect with new clients. So that's a great thing to do with your book. I know a lot of small business owners, their clients have dried up a little bit right now, so it can be a good way to connect with people. It's just a great way to get yourself out and about and get in front of people, which is something we all need to be doing right now.
Yeah, great. For me too, the thing is that look, writing a book is bloody hard. It takes a lot of time. You've got to sit behind a keyboard for hours on end. You've got to have clear space to think. You've got to have bandwidth to think about your topic, because the one thing that Michael and I are not advocates of, and I'll speak on your behalf because I know this to be true, Michael, is we're not just churn a book out and it doesn't really matter, just churn out anything. To be honest, that whole write a book in 48 hours mentality, I find particularly irritating. And I find that people churn out exactly what you imagine of someone who's written a book in 48 hours. Trash. Your book has to be this wonderful extension of your brand. And that's why it's so important. And of course, in every single person I know, we're so freaking busy all the time that we just don't have the time. It's really hard to find the time. So in the midst of a CV kind of crisis, when really people are working from home, things are a little bit different. They're generally quieter overall, particularly if you're self-employed. There is an opportunity, and that opportunity is that you've got time to actually physically plan your book. You've got time to write your book, but you've got time to think about it, think about it more deeply, to really understand the importance of the book, to dive deeper in your topic. And I know for me, again, the value of this is not to just write a book, but to write a fantastic book, to write a high quality book, and a book that you're really proud of, and a book that you're going to be able to leverage your business. So that's the opportunity in here as well. The first part. The second part that I see is also that on the other side of this coronavirus, I have no doubt at all it's going to be extraordinarily busy. People are going to be vying for their position and their niche and all this other kind of stuff. Again, having a book cuts through so much and gives you such an incredible competitive advantage. Now, I've worked with many of you who are on the call and you know, who are listening to this recording, and I've told the story 100 times about the incredible impact that writing my first book 21 years ago had on my life. I wrote a book, 101 Ways to Market Your Business, you know, so long ago, and it transformed every single part of my life to the point of my entire global business, where I've presented around the world, the people I work with, all of that stuff literally all came from writing a really simple, really practical little book called 101 Ways to Market Your Business, and that's exactly what it was. But it was a book that was written for a very specific niche of small business owners who needed help at the time, and it provided solutions to their problems. So that built my brand, and it continues to build my brand all these years later. So in amongst all this craziness, it is a fantastic time to write your book if you can. And I think that we hopefully get that point across. A couple of people are putting questions on the Facebook live thing on my page. I'll answer those in a few minutes, Andrew, a couple of questions you've got there as well. But we'll answer those a bit towards the end because they're more relevant down at the end there. So I guess the first question is, you know, where are you at with your book at this stage of the game too? Is it just an idea? Is it a tinkle? Is it something that you've been toying with for a year, 2 years, whatever the case may be? This was one of your kind of thoughts, Michael. How would you like to manage this part of the discussion?
Well, yeah, it's. I think it's very important to take stock right now of where you are at with your book. So, you know, there's a chance now, like we've just been talking about, some time in front of you, to get writing now that you might not have had before. So it's very important to sit down and actually make a plan to do that. Don't just sit down at your computer and just write, you know, think, oh, I'll just do the first thing that pops into my head. And, you know, you really need work out a plan for both where you're at with your book. So like Andrew said, is it just an idea at this stage? Have you written your first draft? Have you written half of it and you're trying to figure out the second half? Wherever you're at with it, sit down, work it out, and work out the steps to do from here. So that then you can maximize the time you have available. So you're not just sitting down at your computer and just kind of randomly writing and think, hey, I'm being really productive, I'm writing my book. So yeah, have a good think about where you're at, and also have a think about what your time is going to be like over the next couple of weeks and next couple of months even, and work out a plan for how you're going to manage all that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is to collate the data. Maybe there's a few different kind of stages too. Like if it's still an idea, it's really good to develop, you know, that thinking a little bit more of going, okay, well, I want to write a book about this particular topic, and I want to write a book about whatever it may be. And then you just want to put some decent thinking into it. So something that I've noticed with my new book that I'm writing is called Someone's Got to Be the Most Expensive, It May As Well Be You. Now, I started writing that book last year, and I had a few stops and starts. Okay, so, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there. And what I noticed was I had to regroup a little bit, and I did that at Christmas time. Went down to Flinders Island, Tasmania, and regrouped. And the first thing I did was I had to go back over the stuff that I'd written in the past, realize that most of it was crap, throw most of it out and start again. But I also realized how far my thinking had come around the particular topic, the depth that I had to, that I wanted to go in, what had happened since I started writing. So if you've started writing in the past, right now might be the time for you to start off with a regroup, get your thinking right, challenge what you've written in the past. Is it still on track? Is it still relevant? Has this current issue changed things? You know, where are you at from there? So that's the first stage if you started the past. If you haven't even started yet, but it's still an idea, it's still the same kind of approach though. You still, as Michael was saying, you know, you've got to kind of say, well, we need a bit of a plan, but you also need to go, well, okay, what am I thinking about this topic? Like, I want to write my book about what I do. I'm a personal trainer. I want to talk about this fitness regime. well, okay, what does that look like? If I was going to write about it now, get your thoughts out onto paper as to exactly what it is you're going to say. What issues are you going to be solving? What problems are you going to be solving? What is your thinking around the topic? And you can start to formulate your ideas a little bit. Because as we're saying, you don't write a book by just sitting down, opening up a Word document and going, it was a cold, dark morning in Hell's Kitchen. That's not really how we do it. Most of the work comes in planning the book, thinking about the book, getting the preparation. And we'll talk about some of these things as we move through this morning's webinar. But it's about the better you plan it, the better the thinking is that you put into it before you start writing. To be honest, the easier the writing process will be, and the better the quality of the book will be as well by the time you get it to that first draft manuscript. Okay, so that's what I would say. Is there anything else you'd want to add to that, Michael?
Yeah, just one thing I've been thinking about while you've been talking, Andrew, is you and I both meet so many people who say they're going to write a book and then they get stuck really early on. Yes. So the important part of the process is don't just sit down and randomly write. You've got to have a map for where you're going. It'll really help you get finished.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second as well, because it's to me, the way a book evolves for me is it kind of starts with an idea. So my concept, as I said, with my next book is really, it's about encouraging people in business to charge what they're worth. Now that seed started because I see so many people who undercharge. They don't charge what they're worth. And the more, as a business advisor, coach, all that kind of stuff, I saw that all around the world time and time again. I thought, this is common. Then I started to add more depth to that as an idea. Then I started to have my own framework. Then I started to notice examples around everywhere that I was working. Then I started to think about, well, okay, if you're going to go from being cheap and undercharging to being the most expensive, what's the process you've got to follow? So there's all these bits that then progressed. I'm not even thinking about the book. I'm just putting the parts of my idea and my thinking together. Then I can go and start to write the book once I've got that clear. But what most people do is they start with an idea and then try and just write the book from that little idea. And there isn't enough structure around it. There isn't enough meat. And so they normally, from my experience, they run out of steam after a couple of chapters because they haven't got that planning part. Is that kind of what you find, Michael?
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually similar to you, my own personal writing process. I see it as two very distinct stages. And the first one is planning it and mapping it out, brainstorming and that kind of thing. I actually find it quite difficult to come up with the ideas and then write about them straight away. I need to map it out, think about it, turn it over in my head for a while, and then sit down and write. So it is all that's very much part of knowing where you're at and what you're doing next.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And don't worry, we'll give you a little bit more information about this too in a second. So the next question is your why. Why do you want to write this book? So you've got an idea, kind of going, okay, well, I want to write my book about this, or I started writing about it. So what's your big why? I mean, we all understand that, right? That you've got to have a why, but I don't know that we necessarily really sit down and think about that as authors. And if you started your book a year ago and you still haven't got any closer, has your why changed? So two elements in there. So Michael, I'll hand that over to you. How do you kind of manage this with your authors?
So we actually have this discussion with our authors from pretty much the very, very first phone call. So it's one of the first things I ask them when we have a chat about that, because I need to know the answer to that question to be able to give them good advice. So a lot of authors just simply say something like, oh, well, I want to promote my business. And I say to them, well, what does that mean? That's too broad.
Exactly.
Focus down. So, promoting your business, that could mean 1,000 different things. Are you trying to attract new clients? Are you moving into a new market? Are you trying to build your brand? Is there a particular, new competitor who's come into your market at the moment? Are you trying to build your personal profile and therefore build your business? Maybe you've got a particular product or service that you want to feature. There's all sorts of reasons to write a book. You need to be really, really specific about it. Just saying you want to build your profile, promote your business, that kind of thing, that's definitely the starting point, but it's not really good enough to get you writing. You really need to be very, very specific about why you're writing the book.
Yeah, I agree, that specific nature. And it's also, I find it's really interesting that that a retreat I did a little while ago, I had a few people on there, and everyone said that the reason they wanted to write their book was because they wanted to use their book to grow their business. And yet I was surprised then at how resistant people were when I started to keep talking about this commercial element. And they go, oh, you keep making it sound so it's like it's a business. And I said, well, it is a business. You know, if you want your book to build your business, then this is a business tool. Now, I make something really clear for me. I write to make money. I've written to make money for 21 years. I'm a commercial author. I don't drink whiskey all day, have 300 cats, and live in Florida. As like Ernest Hemingway. That kind of thing. For me, it's always been commercial for me, and it's a business, and that's the advice that I offer. But I absolutely love books. I absolutely love writing. I absolutely love teaching people to write books. I love all of that kind of stuff. But my why is very, very clear as an author. And that's why I've been commercially successful. That's why I built a business, a global business around being an author, is because I've been very clear on my why. So for those of you who are on the call, whatever it might be, there is nothing wrong with saying you want to write a book to change the world if that's what you want it to do. And you go, I don't really care about the commercial element. I don't care about that, but I want people to read this message. Look, that's fabulous if that's what you want, right? Because that then has a bearing on how the book is written, the kind of information it has, even how it's published, how it's sold, all the rest of it. If you're writing your book as a business development tool, well, that has another purpose. So what Michael is saying there is the why then influences the advice from people like us. It influences how your book should be written. It influences the messaging. It influences the ideal reader, everything like that. So if you can't say, well, my idea, if you can't go back and say, well, my reason for writing my book is this, then, you need to go away and do a bit more thinking about it as well. Is what I would say on that one. The next question that we get asked all the time: have you got a product architecture to support your book? And this really is a little bit about that whole element of saying, well, if you're writing your book to grow your business, well, you're not going to make $1 million out of selling your book. So what are the products, that you're going to use to sell your as a result of the credibility that your book gives you? Just on passing on that though, your product architecture, if you're writing a book which is, a passion project and it's about, you want to introduce an idea, you can still have a product architecture, but it might be getting people into a Facebook group, or it might be getting people to start a campaign of some sort around the world in whatever it is you believe in. But product architecture is really the bits that go around the book. And for me, when I'm writing a book, for example, for me to decide whether or not I'm going to write a book, I have a very simple little mind map, and it says, can I do coaching around this topic? Can I do a keynote presentation paid? Can I do a podcast? Can I do a one-day workshop? Can I do a 4-day retreat? What are really the commercial things around the outside of the book that it's going to generate? Sorry, Michael, I may have kind of even answered some of that stuff for you ahead of time, but what's your take on the product architecture side of things?
Well, yeah, again, this is a very detailed conversation we have with our authors right from the beginning. It relates back to your why a little bit as well, is that how does this fit into what you're doing? You and I had an author recently at one of the retreats who had a great idea for a book, but it didn't fit into what she was doing. And it was just quite a debate. And the book was fantastic. There was nothing wrong with the book idea, but she wasn't making it fit well enough into what she was doing in her business. So it's very important that you sit down and map it out like you do anything else in your business. So, to give you a few examples, it can be anything you want it to be. We had an author a little while ago who was a real estate agent, and he was going to print 1,000 copies and leave a few copies in every house he visited. So that was his plan for his book. So that was how it was going to fit into his business. He wasn't interested in marketing it. He wasn't interested in selling it. So that approach, us understanding that approach, affects all the advice we give him, and it affects how he writes the book. We had another author a few years ago who the book was the basis for her business. She was starting up a new business. The book was basically a workbook, and she was developing, programs for people and all that kind of thing. And everything stemmed off the book. So again, that's something you need to understand. How does it fit into what you're doing? And again, that affects how you write it. So for both of those authors, they're not interested in marketing the book. They're not interested in, getting out there on TV and all that kind of thing. That's not what it's for. So you really have to understand all this stuff so you can make good decisions about your book.
And also sometimes what we do find is that the terminology that I tend to use is that if you've got a book, there's generally a now and a then book, right? And it's a matter of, again, as Michael said, it comes back to why do you want to write this book, right? So the now book is the logical one if you want this book to grow your business, right? And but the problem is that most people want to write the then book now, so that this book that they've got a passion for over there, it won't help to grow their business. It won't have any other purpose, but they want to write that one now, but they, it kind of doesn't align there. Jody, you've asked a question there. Does it have to be related to your business? What if it's a topic that you're passionate about due to personal experience? Jody, look, absolutely. It doesn't have to relate to your business. You can write whatever the hell book you want to do. That's the whole wonderful nature of it. But it all comes back to us, that question of why do you want to write it, okay? So what that point is, what we find the problem is people say, I want to write a book, and we go, why? They say, I want to use it to grow my business, but they want to write a book that has no logical tie into their business. And you go, well, how is that book going to grow your business? If you, as you're saying there, what you're saying there, Jody, is my book is one that I'm passionate about due to personal experience. That's fabulous, right? If you just want to write it, but you've got to again answer that question, why do you want to write this? It's because you want to share ideas, you want to share thoughts, you want to help people solve problems. That's fabulous. Is it something you want to grow into? Is that a business offering that you want to grow into? Or is it purely just a book you want to write because you want to write it? That's okay as well. Okay, this is that whole point. It's your book. It's entirely what you want it to do, but you've got to understand that it's going to cost you quite a bit of money to write it, and it will have limited commercial, value, I guess, in terms of like what does that translate to for you? So it's a common thing. Michael, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said, Andrew. So certainly 100% go and write that book if you want to. Absolutely do. But from day one, recognize whether it's a personal project or a business project. My book, I've written a book for my business, and it's basically the 7 steps to publish your book. I've got ideas for 20 other books that are not related to my business that I will write one day. But the first book that I've written in my life that's got my name on it is the one for my business, because that's the one I need right now. So absolutely write that other book. But again, coming back to your why, is it something you're just excited about doing, which is fantastic, and make sure you do it. But is that the book you're writing now for your business? That's the question you have to answer.
And so in your case, Jody, you and I have spoken about that. Oops, I'm getting a bit of feedback there. So yeah, in your case there, Jody, that book, you and I spoke about that ages ago as well, which is about the Asperger's and the journey you've been on with your daughter with that. Look, that's definitely a great passion project. And I think because it stays with you, that is certainly a book that you should write, because it's such an important one. And it's certainly something that you are obviously very passionate about, and something that you're still living, going through on a regular basis. And it could help others, absolutely. So without a doubt, it's definitely there. But it's obviously you run a marketing company, right? So when you run a marketing and communications kind of business, there isn't necessarily a logical tie-in. All we're saying is that that's okay as well. But a lot of people these days are writing a book to grow their business. That's the majority of reasons why people are writing books these days. If that's not your purpose, that is totally okay, right? So just, understanding that side of it, what is your reasoning behind doing this? And I think yours is an altruistic reason to do this, Jody, and that's a fabulous reason to write a book. As I said before, just because, I made the line that I'm commercial, I write books as a business, not as a hobby, doesn't mean that I don't appreciate that, or I don't understand the importance of people that have got a burning desire to get a book out. And many of the authors that I've worked with, that's all they want to do is get that book out because it's important to them. And that's as good a reason to write a book as any, as far as I know that we're concerned. So, but You've got to have that go back to that point of aligning. Why do you want to write this? If you tell me you want to write it to grow your business and the book's not going to work to do that, I've got to call you on that and say it's not going to work. Okay? All right, beautiful. Next question, or next kind of, I guess, topic there is such a big one here. Know who you're writing your book for. Know your ideal reader. Michael, I'll let you dive in deeply on this one, mate. I know that, again, this is a sticking point for most people.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. So this is all part of, like we've talked about a few times now, planning out your book from the very beginning. So we so often the answer to this is, oh, I want to write for everybody. My book's for everybody. It's really useful. It's great information. I think everybody needs it. You're not going to write a very good book if you're trying to write for everybody. So like a lot of us do in our businesses, you really need to niche down and target very specifically a particular audience for your book. Because then you can really tailor the language, you can tailor the information, and you can make something really, really useful for them. So trying to write to too broad an audience is going to be a problem for you. In my book, so my book is for small business owners, obviously, who want to publish a book. But when I think about my audience, I've added a few extra words in there. So I've spent days and days and days just working on who I was writing for before I even wrote a word. So if you start off with my book is for small business owners, and then you add in the word, my book is for motivated small business owners. So that's only a small difference. But when I'm writing, I think to myself, I'm not trying to motivate them. I'm starting from the position that they're already motivated. So I don't have to be rah, 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 write your book. If you're not motivated, you need to go out and sort that out yourself, because I'm just going to tell you how to publish. So they're the sorts of things you need to think about so you can really, really focus your content and know who you're writing for and what information they need.
It's also really good to know what kind of problem you're going to be solving for your particular readers. And look, a book that I'm going to recommend to everyone on this call, whether you're listening in live or you're listening to the recording, and some of you who I already coach know exactly what book I'm going to be talking about, but it's Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And it's a fabulous, fabulous book to help you understand who your customer or who your ideal reader is. And what he really talks about is you make, let's say it's your ideal reader, the hero in your kind of story. So, in your book, we got to know, the person who you're writing it for is the hero. And what people are generally looking for these days is a guide, someone who's going to take them from here to here. And from here to here is normally solving a problem, achieving something significant, overcoming something, whatever it might be. And this is what the world wants now. We want guides who take us from here to here to solve our particular issues, challenges, opportunities, whatever it might be. So the more we understand who our ideal reader is and what their problems are and what they're really looking for, the more likely our book is to reach that target market. And as Michael said there, the biggest issue that we hear time and time again is that people are trying to write a book for everyone. And there is not a single book on the planet that has been written for everyone. And there never will be, simply because it's so hard. And people go, oh, but my book is perfect. It's personal development. It'll, rah, rah, it's perfect. Everyone needs to read this. And you go, well, you may think that, but it's pretty unlikely. The biggest problem is it's very, very hard to write in language which is applicable to everyone. And the way that I, use that, the minute someone says to me, oh, my book, it's a business book, for example, it's written for small business owners, for CEOs of large public companies, and for heads of not-for-profits. And I go, okay, so that sounds, it's way too broad, but how does your language work in that? So the minute you start saying, oh, in your small business, when you have this problem, you need to do this, the CEO of a large public company disconnects straight away. So does a not-for-profit, because they don't relate. Same as if you're a small business owner and I start writing in my book, next time you're meeting with your board of directors to work out your 5-year strategy, as a small business owner, I'm thinking about paying the rent on Friday. I'm not thinking about a 5-year strategy. So how do you write a book for those multiple markets without causing disconnection at every level? And you soon realize that. You quickly realize that in the writing process. And so what you do then is you start to write very superficially. because you know you've got to avoid saying anything that's going to alienate one of the other target markets that you think your book is written for. And it gets really, really hard to write, and it becomes totally beige. I can tell a book where the writer doesn't know who their target market is on the first page, right? Because it shows straight away. Yet when you think about it, if someone said to me, my book is for small business owners, and I'm working on the premise that they've got no time, no money, not a lot of skills outside their own area of expertise, and I'm targeting that. So I use small business language. I show that I understand small business problems. I work through that. Then straight away, the reader and the author kind of connect a great deal more, so you can go deeper on that topic. All right. So this knowing who you're writing your book for is so incredibly important. And when I'm actually writing, one of the things that I do, I have a photo of the ideal reader. Now, when I first started writing 20 years ago, I actually had a printout on the wall of 3 people who were my ideal small business target market. 3 people who I knew them personally, I knew their businesses, and I knew their challenges, and I literally wrote to them. And that made my voice very consistent in my book. It made it really clear about the depth and the level of advice that I was offering. It made all these other kind of things flow. And it made it so much easier for me to write this book, back then, simply because I knew who I was writing it to. The language was consistent. The parameters were consistent, everything. So it's a really, really important point. And one, I think, Michael, that people don't spend enough time thinking about, or they make that error of just perhaps going too wide again because they're fearful of missing out on something. Yet the wider you go, the more you'll miss out. I tell you that right now. So yeah. Anyway, that's a rant from me on that one. Okay, next question, mate. How do you advise people to map out the book? So this is kind of almost a bit of like, where do you start? So we know our big why. We know who our audience is. We've thought long and hard about our topic. How do you suggest that people map out their book?
Yeah, so it's actually a lot easier than people think. So a good place to start, and we've kind of talked through this a little bit already. So a good place to start is your high-level topic, obviously. So you narrow down what your topic is and who you're writing for. And I'll give everybody a quick tip. Don't get too hung up on your book title at this stage. We find that people get way too hung up on their book title, and it stops them writing for weeks. So don't get hung up on your book title. Just know what your topic is, and you can work on the title later. Then what you've got to do is, we suggest that authors do some brainstorming on their topic. So you should be able to, anyone who's been in business for a while should be able to write down 100, 150, 200 topics that they think could go into their book. And then once you've done that you've got to pick out, usually there's no fixed number, but usually about 8, 10, 12 of those topics that will become the chapters of your book. So when you're doing that, again, coming back to your target market, have a think about the information that your readers want. So don't just pick the topics that you like to most write about, or you think of a cool topic. Think about what your readers want. So as Andrew put it before, the problems your readers want solved. And then that becomes the basis of your contents list. So they become your chapters, put them in a logical order. And then you actually do the exact same thing again. So look at each of those chapters and fill them out in the same way. So again, look at each chapter topic and come up with 15, 20 ideas that you could put in that chapter. Again, whittle it down based on what you think your readers need to know, and then put those into each chapter. And then what you've got is you'll have 60, 70 topics where you just have to write 500 or 1,000 words on each, rather than looking at your book as this big 30, 40, 50,000 word monster that you have to tackle. So very much like the process we go through at the retreats, Andrew, with people doing sticky notes and that kind of thing. You can move things around and just write topics down and move them around and put them in order. It's fantastic.
Yeah, God bless the Post-it notes. They become an author's, saving grace. And I don't know if you can tell, you might not be able to see, but I've got a big whiteboard just behind me here onto my side. And that's a great place to be able to do that. A really good tip, a friend of mine did, she basically put a whiteboard, or she had a wall or something in her house, and she literally just, every time she had an idea for her book about something she wanted to include, she just literally wrote it on a Post-it note and then just put it up on this this board every time she walked by. And over the space of a month or 6 weeks or however long it was covered in Post-it notes, and then she started to put it into structure afterwards, which was really kind of interesting to watch how it really did take shape. And I think, again, as you're saying there, Michael, you let it, you massage it, you take your time, you get the contents right, you start to, move things around, you add a little bit more detail, you put a few more bullet points in. You get to the stage where you really do feel that it follows a logical kind of a path. Now, if you're perhaps writing a book about something that you do, like literally you can even deconstruct how you do it. Do you have a process that you follow now? Do you have a framework that you are already using? And people generally do for most of the things that we do. So how does that actually work out? How do you, like if you deconstructed your unique way of doing something, what would it look like? And you just go, well, step 1 is I do this. Step 2, I do that. Step 3, I do that. Then you've got the basis of a framework, which then you can actually include in your book as well. Another bit of advice that I would offer, if you've got a favorite book, and I'm sure that anyone who wants to write a book generally is a reader as well, go back and have a look at some of your favorite books and look at the structure side of it. Go back to the contents page and just look and see, dissect the contents page of 5 books that are favorites of yours, non-fiction books, we're assuming here, right? And just see the framework that they follow. See the process that they follow. They generally start with a setting of the scene as a first chapter. Then they kind of introduce an idea. Then they start to go deeper. Then they start, just look at it, write out, how's this book done it? Then the next book, then the next book. And you'll get some really, really kind of cool ideas yourself on how to structure your book. All of the information is really laid out around us, if we're just kind of looking at things perhaps a little bit differently is probably what I would say. But you've got to spend time mapping out your book before you start writing it. Because otherwise, if you don't map it out well, and what I find I do, I'm thinking on it, I'm diving deeper, I'm mapping it out, doing all that stuff, and I reach a point where I go, okay, I'm ready to write now. And then, as Michael said, I go back and I've probably already written, bullet pointed most of the chapters, I've got my detail, and then I can start picking off chapter by chapter and writing it. But I find if I haven't done enough of the mapping out and the forward thinking and the structure and all that stuff, then it's very hard to actually write the book. So I think it's a really integral part. And because most people think you have an idea and you sit down and start writing. And it just doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but it certainly doesn't work that way.
Can I just make something on that, Andrew?
Yeah, please, mate.
Don't feel that the mapping out has to be perfect. So don't think it's the final version of your book. Once you start writing, you may move things around, and then you've got a whole editing process to go through as well. So map it out carefully, give it a lot of thought, but don't slave over it for 2 months and think it has to be absolutely perfect. Map it out until you're happy with it, and then start writing, and then you can do a bit more work on it if you need to as you go.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. The objective of the first draft of your manuscript is exactly that, a draft manuscript, which is ugly, messy, filled with typos, got all kinds of stuff in it that's not quite right. It's not, you don't write it and then press print and 1,000 books arrive. The first draft is just that collection. It's a bit messy. It's a bit all over the place, all of that kind of stuff. But then you spend time working on that draft manuscript. I mean, I'll go from here and just kind of show, this is my first draft of my manuscript, right, of my latest book. So it all looks nice because it's all bound up and all that stuff, but it's terrible. It's got lots of typos and lots of mistakes and there's things that need to be added. But you get the first draft done, go to Officeworks, print it out, get it bound up, and then you sit down and you go through this with a red pen and you do that. And yes, it's terrible, but it's the first draft. Then you can start to refine it. And it's, as you'll see with what we're talking here, it's actually a process. It's a continual process. We're getting it better, we're getting it better, we're getting it better, refining. Okay, planning the writing process. So let's say you've got all of that stuff done. Now you're thinking about, okay, so in the next 6 weeks, next 10 weeks, whatever it is, I'm going to be writing. Okay, so How do you plan that, Michael?
So yeah, this is getting down more. So we've talked about developing your content and all that kind of thing. This is more getting down to the logistics of how you're actually going to write. So what time suits you during the day? You know, what other things have you got on? Having a good plan and good structure to do your writing each day is very, very important. So some people think writing a book is about, you know, sitting down when you have a flash of inspiration and, you know, you've seen something, oh my God, I've got to go and write about that. It just doesn't work that way, especially the kind of writing we're talking about that is for your business. So some days you might not feel like writing, and just like everything else we do in business, sometimes you don't feel like doing it, you still have to do it. So sit down and work out a plan. Have a think about when you're most productive. So some people like to write in the morning. My dad used to write at 2 o'clock in the morning. He'd just lock himself in the study, and you know, you wouldn't see him for 24 hours kind of thing. He'd just write whenever suited him. So everybody's got their own preference. So work out what that is for you. Tell people around you. So this is really, really important. Tell the family, tell the kids, tell the dog, you know, this is my writing time. I'm locking the door. Leave me alone. You know, little things. Turn off the internet. Turn off your phone. Make sure you've got your coffee before you sit down. Then you can just sit down and concentrate on your writing. So it's, you know, I love writing like Andrew does. Some days you still don't feel like it, and you've just got to sit down and do it. So if you've planned out your structure and worked out when you're going to do it, and you're, you know, even down to physically where you sit, make sure there's no distractions. That will really help you get through your book, especially like some people are doing now. Their normal day-to-day routines kind of really get up in the air. It's very important to have a structure.
Yeah, great. And it is one of those things, as you were saying there. If you want to write a book, one of the key elements of writing a book is actually obviously sitting down and writing the words. And I think that we all fall in love with the idea of writing a book, but it is actually at some stage it just comes down to the slog of, you know, of typing, being on a keyboard, and just, you know, that's what stops everyone from writing a book. You know, every day I have people come up to me, not so much now, but normally say, oh, one day I'm going to write a book. And you go, well, you know, the key part of that is you've got to be able to be disciplined enough to write. And the days that you decide that you want to write, I guarantee it won't be rainy and overcast and horrible. It'll be beautiful. There'll be 1,000 things going on outdoors. The sun will be shining, puppies running down the street, you know, bands playing. It'll be like, it's like everyone conspires against you to actually, on those days, and you're going to sit inside and write. But you've got to have the discipline to be able to do that, you know, and that's what really differentiates people from who are one day going to write a book to those people who are going to write it. I think you've got to enlist the aid of everyone around you as well. I think that's really important, you know, that people do know that you're writing a book. And everyone in my world knows when I'm writing, basically just, you know, that they get it and they support me because I tell them I'm writing a book, and it, you know, it becomes a bit of a priority, and it needs to be a priority for that period of time. You know, it's a short-term pain for a long-term kind of a gain as well. So, and that's, you know, that's a part of the process as well. But you also often, the first time you write a book, often you don't know what your writing kind of schedule is like. You don't really know, am I good at writing at night or good in the morning? Am I, you know, how will it work? But I know that those people that say to me, oh, I'm going to write at night time after the kids go to bed, that is a recipe for disaster, because every parent I know, by the time the kids go to bed, they got nothing left. You know, there's no there's no fuel in the tank. You need to have good fuel in the tank. You've got to put your best time into your writing, not your leftover time. You know, that's an important part. So having a great writing space, having a little sanctuary where you can write, you know, having a really comfortable chair, having a routine, make sure that you stand, you know, every hour. People go, oh, I'm going to write 10 hours straight. If you write 10 hours straight, it will exponentially get worse, or de-exponentially, the other side, whatever it is, it'll get worse as you go, because your brain can't just write for 10 hours straight. It needs to have a break. You know, all of those kind of things. You got to move around. You got to drink water. You got to do all of that stuff. So you need, again, a bit of a plan around this. Now, Lolita, you've asked a couple of questions there that I think are really kind of worth answering here as well. When you're writing, one of the common things that we do start to feel a bit is like, is this getting repetitive? Am I saying the same thing time and time again? And one of the challenges with this is really, really simple, is the fact that people don't necessarily read a book from, particularly non-fiction books, from the first page to the last page. People tend to bounce around. They might read a section here, go to another section, then they might go back and read it all. The reality is your book probably will feel a little bit repetitive, but in the beginning part, in the introduction, you say something and you say this line that it is literally, you'll notice throughout this book that a number of key themes are repeated. The reason that they're repeated is because they're the essential themes, they're the key points, most important points that I'm trying to share. And of course, not everyone reads a book from the start to the finish. So if you see those points repeated, that means that take extra special note of those points. By kind of saying that you're going to be repetitive in a few parts gives you permission to be a bit repetitive in a few parts, right? So that's the first thing to kind of look at. The second element of there is you're going to have your book professionally edited. So an editor's going to pick up stuff that's going to go, there's too much stuff this is repeated, and that's why editors generally delete stuff in an edit. So if your book is a 50,000 word book manuscript, it'll probably come back as maybe 45,000 or even 40,000, very, very general there, because it is repeated. We pull it back out, but don't worry about that. Don't let that change what you're doing around it. Just understand that it's a very common feeling that we feel we're being repetitive. The second thing that you've said there is, what do you do if you get a block? Well, really the way that I write, and I'm interested in how Michael does this. So I have my contents page all there. It's all the contents is all mapped out. It's one page. I look at all of my chapters and I go, okay, which one am I going to write today? So I go, right, I'm going to write chapter 23. So I sit down to write chapter 23. I don't write the book chronologically, as in one after the other. I write whichever one really grabs my attention today. That's what I'm going to write today. But before I start writing, I just go back and read the last few paragraphs of what I wrote yesterday. And the reason I do that is because it puts my brain back into yesterday's writing space, so my work is more consistent, okay? But then I start writing chapter 23, and you know what? It's just not kind of working. It's just, it doesn't kind of fit, doesn't kind of sit, doesn't really happen. So then I leave it, I give it 10 minutes. If the chapter isn't working after 10 minutes, I go to another chapter. I don't waste a whole writing session on one chapter that's not working, because it's a pure waste of time. But then what happens is tomorrow, if I go to chapter 23, generally it just flows. And I go, wow, all I needed to do was just to move. Don't waste a writing session when something isn't working. And to be honest, we don't really believe in writer's block. Again, Mike and I have chatted about this a lot of the time. What's your take, mate?
Yeah, I'm banning anybody using the term writer's block. Use it. It doesn't exist. I've never heard of guitar player's block or painter's block. There's no such thing as writer's block. So just don't use that term ever. You can always write something. So like we talked about before, it's about being disciplined. So if we're not waiting for that blinding flash of inspiration, we sit down and everything's all magical and it all flows. Sometimes it is going to be a slog. So if you sit down and you're really stuck, like Andrew said, have a look at what your other topics are and find something you feel like you can write about right now. If that's still not working, sit down and write anyway. Because what can happen is you'll find, number one, even if what you write is really not much good, you can then go back and fix it up later. So you can even just write the bare bones of what you're trying to say, even if you don't think it's that good. You're still getting one step closer to having your book, and then you can go back and fix it, rather than saying, I don't feel inspired today, I'm stuck, I'll come back tomorrow. What are you going to do if you feel stuck again tomorrow? So, and the other thing that can happen is just starting to write can get you writing. So just start writing and it might start coming to you. So don't ever use the term writer's block. You're talking about your process, Andrew. I like a lot of writers should and do. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to write, so it's always in my head. So when I sit down, most of the time I'm ready to go. So you shouldn't sort of sit down at your computer and just stare blankly at it and think, what am I going to write? It just, don't use the term writer's block. It is, it's one of our pet frustrations, because you're a lot closer, the way I explain to people, you're a lot closer to having a book if you've written 40,000 messy words than if you've written 5,000 perfect words. So yeah, get the words down, get them down.
I think Michael's made his point there about writer's block, Lolita. It's a term you'll never ever use again. I love it. All right. So where else do people go wrong in this particular scheme of things? And this is about the writing side of it now. What is some of your thinking there, Michael?
So where people go wrong with the writing side, yeah. So the first one is exactly like we just talked about, waiting for the flash of inspiration. Probably one of the biggest mistakes people make is editing as they write. So, I've met so many people who've got a book that they're halfway through and they just ran out of steam. So obviously you have to do a little bit of editing. You do go back and read over it and do a bit of rewriting, but don't become obsessed with it. The first draft is not the time to make the book perfect. So, you'll do a second draft, possibly a third draft, maybe even a fourth draft. But then you've also got a whole editing process to go through as well. My first draft of my book, especially probably the last third of it, was a mess. I just sat there and went, okay, got to finish this, got to finish this, got to finish this. And so, but I knew I'd go back and fix it up later. So that's probably the biggest mistake we see people make, and their books never get finished. So again, kind of the obvious stuff from what we've already talked about so far as well, not having a plan, not knowing who their target market is. I think probably the second biggest one I see is not having a good why, not knowing why you're doing it. So, and you can pick up really quickly when an author hasn't got a good why, because you'll ask them a question, well, what do you want to do about this? And they just don't know how to answer it, because they don't know why they're, don't really know why they're writing the book. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. I mean, some of the other things, one that we haven't really spoken about here, a bit more mechanical, is that lack of backup. It's such a simple thing. You know what? Over the years, I'm amazed at the number of people who've reached out to me and said, oh, I had 80,000 words written, someone stole my laptop. Or my laptop got destroyed in a car accident or something like that. And I just go, but didn't you have it backed up somewhere else? Didn't you have it in the cloud? Like, I am totally obsessed. I have backup everywhere. Cloud, I email myself, I have a USB, I have it friggin' printed and courier pigeon to friends' places in the Galapagos Islands. Like you name it. It is just... You just have to back it up. And I back up, if I'm having a writing day, I back up 3 times during that day. Like once I lost 5,000 words years ago, simply because I had a poor backup process. That will never, ever happen again, ever, ever, ever on, any side of it. So really think about your backup process from day one. And these days, there's really no excuse. I mean, something as simple as Dropbox, any kind of, even having your desktop backed up on iCloud, there's so many options now for backing up that you've got to have that happening as well. I think another, place where people can go wrong is they ask for advice from too many different areas. And so what happens is, you ask, people give them the draft manuscript to their partner, and their partner goes, yeah, I think it's terrible. And of course, then the book never gets written. And, is your partner your target market? Are they subjective? Sometimes not everyone wants you to write a book. Like there's all other kinds of weird little elements in there as well. But I'm a little bit reserved about getting feedback from other people, to be really honest, on the book writing process, because unless they're going to be really analytical, they're going to be able to provide really positive and constructive advice, it can derail you. And you start taking advice from 5 different directions, it actually pulls your book apart. And they rarely get written when people are too concerned about that. A third one for me is and I see this with accountants, lawyers, people in professional academic roles as well. They have a target reader for their book, but their number one concern is what their peers are going to say. All right. So they're terrified of peer review. So they actually start to write their book for their peers. All right. So even though it's targeted theoretically at a particular audience, they start to justify stuff. They start to over-explain stuff. They start to do all this other kind of jazz. And the book becomes derailed again because they're so preoccupied about what their peers are going to say that the book itself kind of will never get off the ground. And I encounter that a lot, a surprising amount actually. The peer review panic, I kind of call it, when it's like, You know, I did that. When I wrote my first book on marketing, I sent it to other friends of mine who are marketers, and they all turned around and said, "Oh my God, it's so simple. It's so easy. You know, I could have written this." And I said, "Yeah, but you didn't." You know, and that's the moral to the story there. I didn't write it for them. You know, it wasn't a complicated book on marketing written for marketers. It was a book on marketing for small business owners. So again, emphasizes why you got to know your market, your big why, all of those other little bits and pieces in there. And then really probably the last part about the whole where people go wrong or where people get unstuck is there's a great video, if you haven't already seen it. It's by a guy called Tim Urban. It's a TED Talk. So Tim Urban, and go to it. It's about procrastination. And if you watch that video, you'll get it completely. And he really, it's a great example of how procrastination can step in and say, well, I've got 6 weeks to write 50,000 words. So that's, 4,000 words a day or whatever it is. And then, I didn't write it this week. So next week I've got to do 6,000 words a day. And then you don't write it next week. So now next week I've got to do 10,000 words a day. And it's just, the compounding effect of not writing. So you got to write, books get written little bit by little bit. Little bit by little bit, and that's exactly how you got to kind of go with this. All right, so look, that's the main stuff that we wanted to cover. We're happy to kind of take some questions. If anyone's got any questions, please just drop them in the chat box. Maybe give us a little bit of feedback. Has this webinar been helpful? Have we giving you a little bit of direction there? We help to maybe, give you a bit of a pathway to follow. Remember, look, it's a complex process and there's a whole pile of information. What we've tried to cover in an hour is stuff that I cover in 4 days in a retreat or, sometimes in a, over a 30-week kind of program or whatever it is. But we've really just tried to address some of the main kind of challenges or the areas that perhaps stop people from writing a book. And as we said, now is really a great time and a wonderful opportunity for any of you who are thinking about, writing your book now, or even if you just start planning it out now, then you're going to be really moving a little bit closer to getting this book particularly, done. So let's certainly have a quick look at some of the comments. Jody, lots of food for thought, heaps of notes. Thank you, Jody. And I mean, that's the book you've got to write, Jody. There's no doubt about that, because it's there, and it's the bit of sand in your shoe it just keeps reminding you that it needs to be written. Rachel, definitely helpful, the realizations of the complexity. I'd love to know what's next on how to be guided by you. Thanks, Rachel. There's plenty of stuff on my website about that. If you check it out, andrewgriffiths.com.au. We didn't want to do any kind of sell stuff on this webinar. There's stuff on my website. Same with Michael's at publishcentral.com.au is there. Cassandra, amazing webinar. Thank you very much. Great. Nice feedback. And look, thanks for tuning in. There's so much, it's such a big topic. We could talk for a long time about it. There's a guy, Andrew Wheatley, I think it was, on the Facebook page who had some unusual questions, but he had one good question. He said, okay, if I didn't write my book, is there something I could do in the short term before the book? What's your thinking about that, Michael?
Write a shorter book.
Just write like a mini book of some sort. Makes kind of sense, right?
A book doesn't need to be too long. We talked to an author just yesterday who's going ahead. She's got a 12,000 word book. So don't get a book, get your book done. That's why we're here. That's what we're talking about. A book will do things for your business that other things just can't. So, I love seeing authors go through this journey. At the start of the project, I tell them the things that are going to happen, and they kind of go, yeah, I think I understand that. And then the book comes out, and it's the same process every time. The first month or so, a few little things start to happen, and I start to go, oh, I'm starting to get this. And then second or third month, they ring me up out of the blue and say, oh my God, I just got invited to speak at our national conference. Or I just got asked to go on this webinar by this person who I've been trying to get on their webinar for 2 years now. So, a book can do things that other things just can't. So, Andrew, not half joking, but half not, write a shorter book, get something out. 12, 15,000 words is the minimum you need for something, something viable that you can get out there. So, I wouldn't wait. Start planning it now. It's easier than you think. Andrew and I talk to authors all the time. So, oh my God, I don't know how to write a book. It's all too scary. And then, 2 months later, they've finished their first draft. So yeah, it's we work with business owners all day, every day, who were once saying, oh my God, I don't know how to write a book. And they're now out there running around with it.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Well, okay, folks, I think that looks like it's about it. I'm conscious that we've gone a couple of minutes over 11 o'clock. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your words of wisdom, Michael. Always appreciate, always nice to have a chat with you. And ladies and gents, if there's other stuff you want us to do in a webinar, drop us a line by all means. And look, just take care. Take care. Get working on your books. That's the moral to the story.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks. Catch you later, Michael.